Welcome to our show, Holding Ground. My name is Laura Richer. I'm a psychotherapist and the owner of Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. Each week, I'm joined by another therapist from the Anchor Light team to tackle important topics in mental health and psychotherapy. Our goal is to promote well-being by normalizing mental health challenges. We are here holding ground for you every Monday morning at 9 a.m. on KKNW.
Welcome to Holding Ground. This is Kat Carson, licensed couples, children's, and family therapist at Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. I'm here live on 11:50 a.m. Talk Radio, but you can stream this show anytime on the KKNW website or just search Holding Ground on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. I'm joined today by certified pediatric sleep consultant, published sleep researcher, infant mental health expert, and senior lecturer in the counseling psychology department at Antioch University, Seattle, Stanford graduate, film and TV actress, super mom, and all-around badass, Macall Gordon.
Hi. Wow. That sounded great.
Yeah, I'm your cheerleader over here.
You're sweet. Thank you.
It's good to see you and talk to you.
You too.
Full transparency here, Macall was my professor when I was in graduate school.
Yep.
And that's how we met. So
yeah. And started talking about babies.
Yeah. I took a class about counseling parents.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Clearly, based on the intro, we have so many interesting things to talk about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you've done a lot of research on is sleep training.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Hot button topic, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you're on, if you get on any parenting like Facebook pages or anything, but it's sort of a third rail, right? Like it gets really hot really fast. I mean,
yes.
How many threads people have to shut down because it gets too hot, and it's unfortunate. It's too bad.
I talk to parents as clients who are trying to figure out what's the best pathway to take. And then, I was also a mom who had a baby who would not sleep until she was almost 3, or, honestly, it was very, very difficult. And so I know firsthand that
it's a struggle.
It can be really, really hard.
Yeah. And you probably, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm sure that the process can be really agonizing, right? Like, what do I do? What do I feel okay about? What is everybody saying I have to do? What if I don't want to do that? Does that make me am I weak? Am I bad? Am I lax? Like, oh my God, it's incredible, the everything that goes into that. And we can totally talk about that process, because I really believe that the advice that's out there that supposedly comes from research has ratcheted up the intensity of this issue for parents so much that it feels like a matter of life and death, right? Like beyond just being sleep deprived. The stakes are insanely high. I don't know if that's what you kind of, I'm sure that's what you felt, but
absolutely. It's a very difficult time for families when they have a new baby and they're not sleeping. And we joke about it, like, new parents are so tired. But we know just from the science of sleep that when we're sleeping, our brain fluid circulates and is filtered and cleaned, and that our body regenerates, and that our REM sleep actually gives us sanity.
Right. And you're talking about parents, right?
For the parents.
Yeah. Listen, there is a normal period where it's not going to be good. There's nothing. Here's the thing. This is part of my sort of critique of the research, is they always make parents think they have now we're talking about the early months. Okay. So let's say we could say 0 to 6 months, but right now we'll say 0 to 3 or 4 months. the research really and the advice really makes you think you have a lot more control than you do. I mean, I cannot tell you how many parents I get. So I also do kind of these half-hour calls on a telehealth platform called Maven. And so I just get kind of one-off parents asking a question and we talk. And I cannot tell you how many of those parents with a 6-week-old baby, for example, they contact me and they say, "Oh, she just won't sleep anywhere but in my arms," or "she just won't sleep longer than 2 hours at a time, and I've been trying to put her down drowsy but awake and it just doesn't work." And I'm like, yeah, exactly, because she's a little tiny baby, right?
That's
Like,
exactly what they're supposed to do.
that's what they are meant to do, right? So the advice doesn't really give you a good picture of the development of sleep, and goodness knows the development of self-soothing skills. I mean, we could have a whole hour just on that beast of self-soothing, which for most parents is like, it's like this thing they have to get their kid to do. And the problem with that is that it develops, and so does sleep. Like, it's all dependent on brain development that just takes time. You cannot push that. There's not much you can do to push a kiddo past what they can do in terms of it's motor development, it's vision, right? The visual development,
Right.
it's the ability to regulate their attention. I mean, if you really think, if we really, really think about what it takes to go to sleep or calm down once you're upset, it really requires skills that very young babies absolutely don't have. And just by letting them cry doesn't mean you're teaching them anything necessarily, really. So that's a whole topic by itself, like self-soothing. Um,
Right.
but we're telling parents to do all this stuff that really may not work. And so they have expectations that then they're not meeting, that then they feel like, "Oh my God, I don't get this at all."
I
Right?
mean, yeah, I mean, my experience as a mom was that my child just wouldn't go to sleep on her own, and
Hmm.
you know, the crying it out method.
Hmm.
I was getting a lot of pressure from people that I was creating the problem of
Right.
not sleeping, of
Right.
it's you're
Right.
coddling your baby too much,
Right.
and that's creating this dependence that is
Right.
um you're going to ruin you're ruining her.
Right. Right. I know.
And
I
I mean, as a
know.
new parent, you're pretty sure you're doing everything wrong
Anyway.
anyway.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
So
It's like it's like, you know, damned if you do, damned if you
right.
don't. Like, unless, and they also say, if you just do X, Y, and Z, your baby will sleep. And that's not even true, right?
Mm-mm.
It's not even true. So, oh boy, this is a complex topic. So
Yeah.
that's when I don't even know which thing to pick here. Like, I'm like roads are forking out in front of me. Like,
Right.
which
Well,
one do I talk about?
so I can tell you that, like, one of the I sort of looked at some of the sleep books as a parent, and there was this thing that was sort of like a graduated crying it out.
Yeah. Like
And
Ferber?
I think it was like the sleep easy solution or
Oh,
something.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. So
And
I
I
yeah.
tried that, and that resulted in me sitting on the floor almost in tears myself outside of my child's room while she cried for 7 minutes so hard that she eventually threw up, and I gave
Oh,
up.
yeah. See, yeah. So, oh boy, I hear it a lot. And also, if you're having to do that when you don't feel right about it, it really tears you up. I just recently
Yeah.
talked to a mom whose kid is 21, grown, and she had the same experience and she still carries that guilt about it.
Yeah.
So, the message here is not, does crying it out, is it awful? Is it terrible? We should never do it. No. We should just get that out right now. So
Okay.
here's the deal. Here's the deal with sleep interventions. Number one, that parents don't know, there are options, and that there aren't like all these millions of methods. It's the bookshelf will make it seem like that. It'll make it seem like there are all these different methods. And I'm here to tell you, we can put, lights around what I'm about to say. There's only one method. There's only one. The only difference is you can go really, really slow or really, really fast. And the only other difference is how much soothing you're allowed to give your baby or your child. There's one method, which is change the patterns. So
Okay.
here's one. Yeah, I know, shocker, right? Like,
all right, everyone,
listen,
get out your pens and pencils.
Yeah, here we go. No, but here's the thing: is the baby sleep industry. It's huge, right? And people make a lot of money off of a new sleep book because parents are desperate. But parents end up running around in circles because they're like, well, maybe this one, no, maybe that one, no, maybe I'll try this. Okay, and then the problem is way worse because they've tried too many things. It's all the same. So really, all the way from the no cry sleep solution all the way up to Weiss Blue happy baby help, whatever. I always get that confused. Happy baby, I don't remember. It's on my shelf, but I don't remember. All the way up to that, it's all about changing patterns. So whatever your child has as they fall asleep is a pattern they learn for, oh, this is how humans go to sleep. So if you expect them to do something different in the middle of the night, they don't understand that, because they are like, but I got fed and rocked and then boom, I'm in my crib. So now when I wake up, I need to be fed and rocked and boom, I'm in my crib again. Like, it's just a pattern. It's not a crutch. It's not a bad habit. It's just a pattern. And if we want them to do things differently, we have to disrupt the pattern. So everybody out there, you actually don't even need a book. You can literally do this yourself. The point is to gradually shift that behavior over time to having less and less of you involved in that pattern. And so you don't have to leave the room. You don't have to time yourself. You can, stay right by the crib and help your baby go to sleep. You can pick them up and calm them down. You just have to put them back. That's it. And on some level, I feel like, one of those magicians that does some big trick, and that's actually a really easy thing to do. And everybody's, marveled because it seems so amazing. It's really actually pretty simple. But the books are, they make you think that there's some value in letting your child cry for a certain amount of time. And I can tell you 100% there isn't. There just isn't a value in that. Now, what I also need to say is there's a big caveat here. Parents of fairly mellow kids, which is about, and I don't mean mellow like, I just mean they're kind of easygoing in a way. Like they might fuss about something, but they'll get on board. That's about 80% of kiddos are, in that middle of the, they're most children.
So sort of temperamentally average.
Temperamentally pretty, okay. Somewhat even keel, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Now, these kids, if you do crying it out, it may be like the books say, the books promise, right? Don't they? Like, oh, it'll be bad for like 3 nights and then it'll be over, or 4 nights. And these kids maybe fuss, maybe they cry, but it's over in 15 or 20 minutes. No big deal. No harm, no foul, not hard. Then there are the kids who are crying for an hour and a half and are throwing up or losing their voice, or parents get them down to sleep and they're back up in an hour and the parents have to do it all over again, night after night after night. Those two situations are completely different. So we can't say crying it out is great for everyone. And you also kind of can't say crying it out is always trauma, right? Because people are really worried about that.
Right.
Like, am I traumatizing my child? And you could say, we can't say kind of universally either one of those things. Now,
so what you're saying is for the kids who are not able, that 20% who are not able to kind of go to sleep on their own, that they're developmentally and neurologically, maybe they just don't have the skills yet.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So chances are, and we haven't talked about your non-sleeping one, but I can usually tell people that if they, I mean, 100% of the people who come to me have these kids, partly because I specialize in them, right? um, but I also think that almost all people who end up making their way to a sleep coach have a kid like this. Because listen, if they could read a book and do sleep training with a mellow kid, it probably worked, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't really
Right.
matter. And that's the other thing. So with these kids, it doesn't really matter which method you used because they probably all worked. Or you might never have needed to use it in the first place. Here's another little magic tidbit. Did you know that all the sleep research says, oh, sleep problems in infants are prevalent? They affect approximately 20 to 30% of babies. That means for 70 to 80%, you might not even have needed to do anything. That most babies will figure out how to go to sleep.
Hmm.
So that always just because I think the message in the books is you better do this because if you don't, you for sure will have a sleep disorder or whatever.
I'm curious, did you come to this work because you had kids who had a hard time sleeping?
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah, so much. Yes. So I'll tell you, this is exactly. So my daughter's now in her mid-20s. So this was a while ago. It was kind of just at the beginning of the internet. Thank God. I'm so glad I didn't have the internet. Um, and listen, the minute she was born, I knew something was up because they wheeled her into me and her eyes were wide open like laser beams. They weren't that kind of fuzzy doped up newborn kind of look. She was like on. And I thought,
What's up, Mom?
yeah, I was like, that doesn't seem normal, does it? And I just, discounted it. And then she had really bad colic, which is absolutely no joke. I mean, I would go through the 27 hours of labor again before colic. It was awful, so hard. And she just was just on. I mean, at 2 months old, I'd have to walk her around the apartment to look at things because she would get bored. And I'm like, how is a 2-month-old bored? Like really just like on all the time. And everything was kind of a big deal. But it was not just negative on in a negative way, it was on in a positive way. She was just took in experiences and never slept. I mean, we were co-sleeping and it was a problem, right?
Yeah.
So I remember, all the magazines. This was the time of that, like, what do they call it? Not vulnerable period, but that whole thing about the first 3 years are so important.
Attachment parenting?
No, well, no, yes, but it was about critical windows of brain
Oh,
development, right?
yes.
Like they're critical windows, brain development. And so there was all this stuff in the magazines about how important responsiveness was, right? Responsiveness, it builds this bread, blah, blah, blah. The very next page, do crying it out. And I was like, gosh, that doesn't really make sense. And then I noticed that the age to start kept getting younger and younger. And I thought, well, that seems weird, but I'm sure they've tested it. I'm sure they, that's safe. But I knew it would never work for this one because I knew she would cry for 3 straight hours and never give up ever, ever, ever. So we just didn't even try it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Plus, I didn't think I could do it. I just didn't, just my own, because guess what? Shocker. I think I'm intense too.
You know what? I might also be intense.
Right? Who knew? I mean, I definitely didn't know. I mean, it really was a realization for me that
Yeah.
I remember kind of going, why are my kids so intense? And then it was like, oh my God, I think I'm intense, and sensitive and all that other stuff. So it was a great, interesting, hard way to learn about myself for sure.
I want to hear more about this and
Yeah.
more about your research, but right
Cool.
now we're going to go ahead and take a break.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to Holding Ground, and we will be right back.
Get your daily dose of variety. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Holding Ground on KKNW 1150 AM and all podcast platforms. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Anchor Light Therapy Collective, Holding Ground, Instagram, Anchor Light Therapy Collective, Holding Ground Talk Radio, and YouTube channel, Anchor Light Therapy. I'm here today with sleep researcher and certified pediatric sleep consultant, Macall Gordon. And Macall, we've been talking about sleep training and child temperament and how to know what kind of sleep training to do with your child. And some of the messages that are out there for parents. We've both been talking about the temperaments of our own children. We're not exactly the best sleepers when they were babies.
They were not easy. No, they were not easy. And that's the thing, is that there's a lot of parents out there who have these children that are just a little more, I'm starting to call them extra. They're a little extra.
A little extra.
A little extra.
Yeah.
And I like that term because the research calls it difficult. And I hate that. I hate that so much. The research really, it just draws all kinds of lines between a difficult temperament, and they call difficult, fussy, hard to soothe, a lot of tantrums, a lot of meltdowns. I mean, I get that. That's difficult. And they draw all these terrible lines to these outcomes, bad stuff. But my perspective is that they're not also looking for good stuff that's in there. They're not looking at that. That could cause the tantrums and the meltdowns and the fussiness. And B, they don't talk about how having a kid with a temperament that's a little extra affects parents. It's so weird how linear the research is. They don't look at things from a systems perspective ever, or I shouldn't say ever, really very much, because it's hard, right? From a research perspective, that's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So they don't take into account that if you have a rough start, let's say, so rough labor, potentially rough birth, child has some health issues, has colic, has reflux, isn't sleeping, screaming a lot all day, that's going to affect you as a parent, right? You're going to be like, number one, this is not like anything I have ever heard of or expected.
Right. This is supposed to be this time when, I'm supposed to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a parent now. Right. This is my child. I feel so in love and relaxed and
And there's all those images, right? I mean, I keep referring to those Pampers ads where there's like a mom sitting in a rocking chair with the sunlight streaming in, and I was just like, okay, that never happened. It was so far from anything I actually experienced. So you can, I believe, get really knocked off your center, because not only is it completely different than your expectation, it also is taking like way more out of you to, imagine, maybe we both experienced it. You're trying to figure out why your child is screaming, and they're not, I don't know about yours, but mine was not just like fussing. It was like somebody stuck her with a pin. Like it was, I thought, do I have to call, what is it? Do I have to call 911?
Oh, now, absolutely. We ended up at the pediatrician, and I think the pediatrician thought we were crazy.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Because, it was just like our baby was so upset, and we thought there was something wrong because it just sounded like there was something wrong.
Yeah. And did they just kind of discount you, or what?
Yeah, I feel like that there's a box. How I felt was that there might have been a box that they checked that was like overly anxious new mother or something.
I know, but that's not okay.
I know. And now as a mental health clinician and with a lot more training and education under my belt, I have so much compassion for my new mom self.
Yeah. Yes. But here's the thing is a lot of pediatricians do chalk stuff up when there actually is something really, really wrong. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know now because back in the, early mid 90s, they didn't know that babies could have reflux. And I definitely know that so there was no medication. And I definitely
Yeah.
know that she was actually in pain. And that we just didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, so, but it's happening now where, I have parents, whose pediatrician has kind of patted them on the head, and their kid, really did have all the signs of like silent reflux, which is painful and disrupts sleep profoundly. And that pediatrician really could have helped. I've seen kids who have apnea, who are not breathing at night, and it hasn't been caught. Like, so there's stuff. And I always tell parents, I was like, look, if you think there's something wrong, push the pediatrician or find a new one, because that's, you deserve to be heard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Trust that parent intuition.
Totally, totally. So that, having a really fussy baby like that, is not only like a major draw on your energy, because just listening to crying for a parent is really, really hard. Um, but it erodes it has assaulted your expectations, right? So then you're like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then it erodes your sense of competence 100%, because you're like,
Absolutely.
I you
Yeah.
know I remember reading something that said, oh well, you'll learn your baby's cries, and then your baby will cry and you'll do something that will help her calm down, and then you'll get this sense of like, oh, I know what I'm doing. And I never got that. I never got that. So that's sort of like this perfect storm for parents. And that all happens in the first, say, several months. And I think sometimes parents don't really ever get it back. So if you're starting out, like, I don't think I know this kid, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, you know, it can be a real cascade effect. And if you think about families that might not have support, or families that have other stressors, then sure, you could say that temperament led to poorer outcomes. But I think it's possibly because the parents have been so like wiped out, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And the expectations put on them, and the things they're reading, and um,
well, imagine if you
kind of
have
like
a
a perfect
family.
storm.
Yeah, imagine if you have a family that's truly stressed. They have financial stresses, they have personal stresses, and then you have an unsoothable baby. Like, that's for sure is like a risk factor, for a lot of really bad outcomes. So we need to, obviously, we need to take parents seriously, and we need to support them. And I would say it does start with pediatricians to take these things, because there's normal fussiness, and then there's not normal fussiness. So, when I get a parent who's like, well, my 4 month old is waking a lot at night, of course, my first thought is, well, that's the 4 month regression. That's probably normal. How much are they waking? And if someone says, oh, like now they're waking like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, I'm like, okay, pretty normal. If someone says they're waking every hour, every night, I'm like, okay, there's waking and then there's waking. And now we need to find out what that is, because that's not really what we would consider expectable for that age.
And it
So,
sounds like it can be like a temperament issue, or a kind of a developmental
well,
issue,
physiological, yeah. We
physiological.
in the first 6 months, we can separate this out. First 6 months, after 6 months. First 6 months, we really look at expectations. What are you expecting this baby to achieve? And then physiological stuff that interferes with sleep. And so I always rule out physiological stuff. So that is silent reflux, which is like baby heartburn. So baby might not spit up, but it's heartburn, so it's painful.
Hmm.
And then in the first 6 months, we don't see a lot of breathing obstruction. But if your baby's snoring or breathing through their mouth, they could have like a food allergy. Food
Mhm.
intolerance is another big one, like dairy, or soy intolerances. There's even, I've even sent people to like craniosacral therapists, or pediatric chiropractors, because There are some babies that kind of through the birth process get something a little tweaked and they've got a muscle or something that's out of whack, and they're actually in pain, so they can't settle down to sleep. Um, this is where we also talk about sensitivity, because which is part of temperament. We should just go through what we talk about when we talk about temperament. But there are going to be kids that much smaller things bother them, right? It's like the princess and the pea phenomenon, right? There are going
Yeah.
to be some kids and adults who sleep through anything. I am not one of those people. I have to have a very specific context to be able to sleep at night. So if you think that for some reason we don't think that babies are the same way, right? We always think, oh, sleeping like a baby, ha ha, right? I hope nobody slept like my baby. I really do. Um,
It's
it's
true. When I'm talking to parents, I try to remind them that there's so much that we have control over as adults. And
yeah,
there's so many things that we do and we know how to do to make ourselves comfortable and to make
right,
our surroundings the way that we
right,
want them.
right,
But for kids, they have so little control.
right.
And,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
absolutely, 100%. And of course, you could make yourself crazy trying to intuit what's bothering your kid.
right.
Um, but it's absolutely true. So what we're talking about, remember we were talking about the 80% of kids who are pretty much even keel. Mellow is probably not the right word because probably those parents would say my kid's not mellow, but it's like even keel. Like if they get upset, they're pretty easy to calm back down. That they cry, you do something, they stop crying like that. Then there's this about 20, maybe 25% of kiddos that are, like I said, a little extra. And that means what I look at is intense, meaning not just negative, but positive too. So they call it in the research, it's called reactive. It just means bigger feelings, big feelings, right? Everything's a big deal. Big happy, big mad, big sad. Um, a little more sensory sensitive. So they have a much thinner barrier to the outside world. Littler things bother them or alert them or whatever. It takes very little to make them wake up.
So like tags in clothes or sand in your shoe or
yeah. Well, it
yeah.
can be that when they get older for sure, but this is even like noises or wet diapers. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's yeah, and we see this in kiddos too with I'll tell you one of my flags. So I have these little flags where if someone says it and I go, okay, I know what kind of kid you have. I totally know. You don't have to say anymore. And one of them is these parents go, well, the rocking chair is out. We have to bounce her on a ball. I'm like, oh, okay. So a lot of times these kids need this very vigorous stimulation in order to be able to downshift. So there's a huge sensory processing component in this temperament. And figuring out which type your kid is hard because I think sensory things are not intuitive. They're not obvious, right? Um, intensity, sensory, alertness. Like I just want to see what's happening in the world. So my flag there is a parent will say, yeah, it's like she has FOMO. She doesn't want to go to sleep because she's afraid she'll miss something. Ding, ding, ding. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter, we used to joke because we would be trying to put her to sleep and she'd be so tired and she wouldn't want to go to sleep and she would sit there and she would tap her face to keep herself awake and we'd say she doesn't want to miss anything.
Yeah. See? Yeah. And that's a really positive attribute, right?
Yeah.
That is a positive attribute.
Absolutely.
But boy, is it a pain for sleep,
Yeah.
right? So these kids, that speaks to a difficulty for her shifting her attention away from the world to going to sleep. So alertness, sensory sensitivity, intensity, and also just a sense of like being, I call it perceptiveness, but these little kiddos don't miss a trick, right? As they get a little bit into like later infancy, they notice everything. They're really on it. And so changes in their routine, they pick up on any wiggle room you have, anything that you kind of go, okay, forget it. Just for tonight, I'm going to just feed her back to sleep. Boom. They know. And then the next night you are stuck because they remember. They remember. Yeah, really perceptive, and then persistence, really digging in their heels, saying, I don't want this to change, and I'm going to fight it tooth and nail till whatever, till you change your mind. So that's, there's a few more, but those are the biggies, I think, that, really combine together to make sleep and working on sleep really, really hard. You get a kid who doesn't want to sleep, who has a hard time going to sleep, and then you have this, like, oh my God, how did we get here? So what we know so that I did this big parent survey. I surveyed parents of infants and then old, children like 2 to 5. And I got 850 surveys completed, which is huge. So we were able to really do some good statistical analysis on that. And so what I was curious about was, is temperament a thing? like how does it, number one, are kids who would be considered difficult by the research, is there good stuff in there that we're not looking for, right? Do they have these positive attributes, or are they more likely to? And then how does it affect sleep? I was really curious because I think that the books are really talking about the mellower kids or the more even keel kids. And that parents of intense kids are going to have a way harder time, and maybe it's even way less successful. Like maybe they don't even experience success, and then they're just out in the cold. I don't know about you, but I was like, in the 90s anyway, it was like I call it cry it out or gut it out. Like it was literally one or the other. And we were doing attachment parenting that was supposedly going to solve everything, and it did not. It did not.
Right.
It did
Right.
not. We actually went and met with Dr. Sears when my daughter was like 5 months, because his office was near where my folks lived. We just went and booked an appointment. We were like, what the heck? What is going on here? Because it was not working out the way he sort of promised. And then he said, hey, I'm writing this book called The Fussy Baby Book. Would you feel like contributing?
Did you?
Oh yeah, a lot of that's me. A lot of it.
I didn't realize that.
A lot of it. Yeah. In terms of like the little parent anecdotes.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
I have a copy where I highlighted everything that was what I had written, and it's a lot. So you can say I wrote the book. No kidding.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was hilarious. It really is so anyway, so the survey. So what we found, shocker, is that yes, kids who would be considered difficult, so fussier, more intense, emotionally intense, were slightly had score, and I didn't ask great sensory questions, so I look back on that, I could have done that better, but we're more likely to talk about things like a bigger startle reflex, and loud and noisy places bothered the kids, and sensations bothered them. They were more perceptive, picked up on little things, more persistent. They also had things like, especially for the children, like older, they were more in tune with things like social dynamics, like bullying or exclusion or like fairness. And so it speaks to this sort of like an understanding of how things work and how things should work. They were more perfectionistic. So anyway, that was an amazing thing to find out. Also, I found out that they were more likely to have had colic or reflux or apnea or ear infections or food intolerance, or moms reported a difficult labor or birth. So those things,
so interesting.
Yeah, they were related, and I don't think we can figure out the mechanism of that. So that's interesting. It's really interesting. Some people would say, oh, look, if you had a difficult labor and your kid had this stuff, you're just perceiving your kid as more difficult, which is another thing I'm going to be sort of working on pushing back against, because it's that patronizing kind of like, oh, well, you just think your kid is more difficult, but they actually aren't.
Right.
And when I talk to parents, I just don't think that could possibly be true. I just don't think it can possibly be true. And then what we found out about sleep training was that for sure these parents had tried more things. The parents of the more extra kids had tried way more types of interventions and rated them all as way less successful than parents of mellower kids, which we expected. I think we expected that. So it's not like parents aren't trying. They're trying. It's just not really working. What I'm curious, did you have one thing? It was just your daughter got older, but was there ever a thing that worked for you?
I honestly think it was just sort of, it must have been hitting those developmental milestones.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah, I know. It's hard to know. It's like, oh, it all of a sudden just fixed itself.
I tried so many different things.
Right. I know.
And eventually I just did what worked for us, which was, maybe we co-slept longer than, she would end up coming into, into my bed and
that's super common. It's super common. So, one thing we can talk about is two things. One is another sort of key of success. Remember how I said, look, you can choose what to do just as long as you're working, you always go forward in terms of doing less. So if you're lying down with your toddler to go to sleep, work on sitting up and then sitting on the floor and then sitting 6 inches away from that. I mean, you can go really slow, but just always be moving forward. The second, the biggest piece though, is know that they will hate it at first. Even if I kind of joke around and say, look, there's no way to sneak up on a baby. There is no way to make a change that this smart little whippersnapper is not going to notice, right?
Right. Because they're so in tune with your body and your nervous system and being close with you. That's how they regulate themselves.
That's how they regulate, but they also really like pattern. They really like consistency. I think the intense ones, the extra kids, I think even more than the even keel kids. Even keel kids are like, whatever, a little bit. Like, I'd prefer if you did this, but if you're not going to, okay, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but these little ones really, really, really like predictability. So, so whatever you do, always just be moving forward. Don't ever go backwards, because if you go backwards, you've just sunk your own ship. Like it will be 10 times harder to move forward. So I tell parents, like, look, we don't know how hard the first night's going to be. The first night that you go from like rocking your baby to sleep to putting them in the crib and trying to get them to sleep in the crib, it's going to look like it's not working, but don't bail, right? Don't bail. Just push through that first night, because once your child gets a sense of consistency, like, you're laying down a new pattern. So the first night they're not going to recognize it because
it's not a pattern yet.
It's not a pattern.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, what, right? Like, what are you doing? What are you expecting me to do? I don't understand this at all. And as long as you're present and calm and consistent, and you're keeping them within what I call their window of tolerance, that's the best you can do. So let's talk right now about crying and what parents consider or worry that is trauma, or that it's going to affect attachment.
Okay. I think we should take a short break and then come back and hear about the windows of tolerance, and what parents can do, and then also some resources for parents in the Seattle area who are struggling with fussy babies.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay.
Thanks for listening to Holding Ground. We will be right back.
Alternative Talk 1150. We're on your radio at 1150 a.m. We're on your HD radio at 98.9 Channel 3.
So many ways to listen.
We're on the web at 1150kknw.com. Streaming live audio and video, as well as MP3 archives of many of our shows.
So many ways to listen.
And now, we're on your smartphone or tablet. Download our free app in the Apple App Store or Google Play and take Alternative Talk 1150 anywhere you go.
So many ways to listen.
Broaden your horizons. You'll be amazed at all the topics we cover on Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Holding Ground on KKNW 1150 AM and all podcast platforms. This is Kat Carson, licensed couples, children, and family therapist at Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. I'm joined today by certified pediatric sleep consultant and published sleep researcher Macall Gordon. And we are talking about kids and sleep, babies and sleep.
Yeah. So we were sort of, and this is a huge topic, but talking about crying, because people are really worried about crying. They're crying. And here's the thing. They're worried if they did crying it out that they hurt their kid. So let's talk about crying.
Okay.
So I would say, you know, people often say, oh God, did I wreck attachment? Okay. So let's just dispel that myth first of all. Attachment results from a consistent pattern of responsiveness to your kid. It's built up over time, and I don't believe it can be tanked by one episode of sleep training. I don't think you can derail attachment by sleep training. Now, that said, it depends on your kid and how much crying, you know, resulted. But if you have done sleep training and it worked and your kid is sleeping through the night now, like, it is all good. I really want to take that off of parents. So, you know, what we're talking about here is some kids who are really sensitive and maybe parents feel kind of pressured into doing sleep training that they don't feel like is right for them, or their baby really cried, kind of like yours. Like, I was really worried. Now, did you derail attachment? No, you did not.
No,
you did not. So let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Now, is it possible that there are effects of crying for certain babies at certain ages who cry a certain amount? Possibly, yes, but we don't know, and it's never been researched. I can tell you that there's advice out there that advocates what we call pure extinction. So cold turkey extinction, meaning you close the door, you don't go back in, as early as 8 weeks old. I am concerned about that. I do get concerned, because that's
babies,
a lot of
that's all they have to tell you they need something.
Right. Well, and what we're talking about is not just the communication function, but is a biochemical situation. So I had mentioned briefly windows of tolerance. So babies, their nervous system can only handle a certain amount of distress, right? Like all of us, only a certain amount of distress. Beyond that, all kinds of things happen to protect us from the effects of that distress. So the ability to manage distress grows as the baby grows. And when they're very little, their little toolbox for downshifting is very small. There's a prominent child developmental researcher named Claire Kopp, and she said something fantastic. She said, look, you know, we want to challenge babies without overwhelming them, because a baby can get their hand to their mouth to self-soothe when distress is at a manageable level. Once they're actively crying hard, they don't have it to get that hand to their mouth, because they're in full on distress. So this idea that a baby can be in like crazy town crying and that they can downshift from that is really, I think is a mistake. So we have to know how much distress our baby can handle for their age and for their temperament before they actually need help. And I always tell parents, I'm like, look, you know, when a baby goes from, I don't like this, I'm not happy, to freak out town. And that's when you can step in and calm them down. Nobody is learning anything when they're hysterical. I just don't believe that's true.
I mean, it's true for adults, true for kids, true for babies.
Right. So the idea that you cannot pick them up to calm them down, I think is a little bonkers.
Yeah.
And most of the books will tell you you can soothe your baby, but don't pick them up. Why? You know, you get them back to that zone of tolerable frustration, and you can put them back. You want to keep them in, I'm not happy about this, but I'm also not completely losing my mind. So that's the, you know, the deal with my concern about really pure crying base. And there's so much stuff about, oh, it's never been shown to hurt the baby. Okay. For most babies, that is probably true. But honestly, the investigation of actual negative effects for certain babies at certain ages has not been done. It has not been done. The research that talks about crying it out and that there's a lack of effects really hasn't, it really has not asked good questions. Most of the time they've asked parents, and back if everybody dusts off their old research methods stuff. The problem with that is if you've had a parent who've just gone through, you've taken a parent of a sleepless infant and they've just done this intervention, and then you ask them, well, how's your relationship with your baby? Number one, they're sleeping better. So automatically the world is going to look completely new.
Right.
And second of all, would a parent who's just done this intervention say, actually my baby stopped smiling? No, they're not going to do that. So asking parents, while it's okay to do, it shouldn't be the only thing that we do to investigate any negative side effects. Or we should just say, look, come from a perspective of, for most babies, it's fine, but what babies is it not right for? So parents can really have it, they can be more informed about it.
Yeah.
So I think just saying it's not harmful, it's not harmful, it's not harmful, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it doesn't always serve parents super well.
And I would imagine that for some babies with really sensitive temperaments, if they do have sort of an attachment wound from being left to cry for a long time, that the result would be that they're less interactive, or more, maybe they seem more indifferent, which might not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might not pique someone's interest.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that it would be an attachment wound. I mean, I think it's problematic, but the parent's going to go back to being who they were. I think part of it is that the focus on parental behavior in sleep training overlooks anything the babies bring into the table. So what if you go do sleep training and the baby's crying and crying and crying, and it turns out that kid has reflux, or it turns out that kid has something that's causing them. I've had several clients, older kids, who had a serious a ferritin level deficiency. So they were low in iron, basically, and that completely was the driver of this kind of bonkers sleep behavior. So those parents had worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and nothing was changing because the kid had an underlying, kind of medical issue that was pretty easily, addressed. Or kids who have apnea. You could stand on your head and you're not going to fix that problem from a behavioral perspective.
Right.
So I just think that the information just doesn't allow parents to have a plan B, like, okay, try this. And if it doesn't work, look at this stuff, or try this second tier of, approaches to see which one fits your kid better.
So it sounds like if you're having problems with your baby and sleep, it might be time to reach out to a pediatric sleep consultant like Macall.
Certainly could. Yes, you certainly can. I would say over 6 months for sure. Under 6 months, we always look for physiological causes like reflux or food problems. So that's maybe talking to a pediatrician, doing what works. If you feel like your baby is really like on that upper end of fussy, we do here in Seattle have a phenomenal resource. We are so lucky to have the Cooper House, which is a node of what's called the Fussy Baby Network. And they do, I don't know what they're doing now with COVID, but they do free home visits, and it's sort of a team approach to figure out what's going on with your really fussy baby. So you can look up the Cooper House or the Fussy Baby Network, which is based in Chicago, and they will have information on how to reach the Seattle folks.
And then, just as we were saying before, sometimes these fussy babies coincide with difficult births and difficult sleep, which is hard on moms and dads,
Yeah.
which can lead to postpartum anxiety and depression
100%.
and isolation. And,
Yeah.
you know, typically new parenthood can be a very isolating time anyway. And
Yeah.
this year it's been particularly isolating for new
Horrible.
parents.
Horrible.
You know, some of the mommy and me and daddy and me groups that really made people feel connected to anything have been kind of off the table. So if you're feeling any kind of depression or anxiety, overwhelmed, please feel free to reach out to a therapist.
Yeah. We should say that Perinatal Support International and Fussy Baby, there are warm lines as well. So if you need to talk to somebody and they can get back to you the next day, there are great warm lines for support. You did mention PEPS. We can definitely mention Program for Early Parent Support is here in Seattle. There's small groups that are meeting virtually on Zoom, just for parents to check in every week and talk about, you know, their experiences with parenting. Now more than ever, don't just suffer in silence. Like really reach out. And if your baby is really, really not sleeping, I said contact me over 6 months, but if you really have you don't have any idea what to do, fully contact me. My business is called Little Live Wires. So it would be littlelivewires.com. And I'm happy to at least point you in the right direction, because Seattle is a great place for resources. We are so lucky.
We really are.
Yeah.
Well, Macall Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today on Holding Ground. Thank you for listening to Holding Ground. Tune in next week for more exciting content on everything positive in mental health.
Thanks for tuning in to Holding Ground. You can find us here every Monday morning at 9 a.m. I'm Laura Richer, owner of Anchor Light Therapy Collective.
And I'm Michelle Mooney, a therapist at Anchor Light Therapy Collective. Find us online at anchorlighttherapy.com.
We'll see you next week.